I always thought that it was MLK who came up with...
And we haven't learned to disagree without being violently disagreeable.
But apparently, he was just re-quoting Zig Ziglar. You know, from Zig and Zag. Preach! Testify! Do you know you sound smart? Start spitting Latin. Makes you sound boffin. Non e ignoramus. I'm no fool. Ignorance actually comes from the Latin ignorare, meaning to not know. And that fit perfectly with the time. I don't know, it's the perfect description of times gone by when information was really hard to find. I know it's crazy to think, but there was a time before Google. In ancient times, there was this thing called the oracle where you could find information about important things. And I'm not talking about floaty women on the funky fungus in ancient Greece. I'm talking real ancient, you know, the 80s. For 99% of the history of man, information and therefore knowledge has been out of reach of 99% of the earth. Basically, 99% times 99% means most people knew jack, and you could fill that void with all kinds of hocus pocus. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were just getting to grips with who and what. Answering where? That was a 50-50. And shrug shoulders was the default answer to any question that started with how and why. In times like this, you can see why expressions like knowledge is power were true. If you didn't know anything and you couldn't find out anything, then your mental age never really rose beyond a child. And it was access to the information that was the differentiating factor. That separated the haves and the have-nots. And during this time, it was the smallest fraction of the population that actually had access to this knowledge, and they could select, twist and pull the information to suit their needs. But then, the internet sprung into our lives in the mid-90s with two express purposes. Firstly, saving future generations from the eternal question of eye contact and nod, or look at the floor and cough when buying top-shelf delights from newsagents. And secondly, after millennia, finally giving parents a fighting chance against any child's question, Bruce Lee style. And in this wonderful new world of information, don't ask me, transformed, but not into wisdom. It mutated into intellectualized ignorance. I made that term up. And this is the new ignorance that's sweeping the world. And this is how it works. You start from a gut instinct position of feeling. You pitch your tent at one end and then gather up as much statistical firewood and supplies for a long winter. Exhibit A.
And afterwards, I am going to give you the actual facts and figures to show you who's right and who's wrong.
That's got to stop, because I got statistics right here which will prove me right.
Anything you agree with gets a thumbs up and share. Anything you disagree with, you ignore or you take a pot shot. And this is an intellectual pursuit. You're basically bombarding yourself with facts, stats and quotes. You're basically stocking your bunker. It makes you feel smart as you reel off a whole load of info to justify your point. But it's still ignorance, because in order to make this thing work effectively, you have to ignore the other side's information. You see how that worked? Clever, huh? You know, with the ignore. This is a polarizing, adversarial style of conflict resolution. And you know who uses it? Lawyers. And we all know how loved they are. Now, I've got to wonder whether this is still a better position than the old style shoulder-shrugging ignorance. And I'm not sure it is. There's a passiveness in I don't know. No one says, I don't know, let's fight! But maybe a high tide does raise all ships. Matt Curzon, Brereton's a lawyer, and he wrote, "Our problem as a society is that we have become too intolerant to someone who holds a different view. It seems as if our people have lost or forgotten the skill and art of communicating with any sense of courtesy and respect for each other, and of the opinions of one another." And I've got to agree with him. I mean, personally, I don't know if we've become less tolerant. I mean, there have been some pretty intolerant groups over the centuries. But now that we're all able to just hold and justify an opinion, the volume of intolerance has increased, rather than the intolerance of the intolerant rising. We're essentially doing a Terminator. We load up our selected facts as weapons, and then turn those selected facts on our fellow man, with a short but sweet line. Wrong. Brereton's answer is, we need to make a concerted effort to return civility to our discourse. Otherwise we run the risk of going beyond redemption. Surely we can agree to disagree, and do so respectfully and civilly. And that goes for the ones who cause the action, as well as those with the reaction. And this echoes a sentiment of many a wise man. But as is my way, I've got a slightly different spin, which involves the evolution of a new concept. Spectral intelligence. Spectral intelligence just requires you to see and understand the extremes on both sides. Then you can understand the shades in between the poles. The upside is it reduces the heat of the emotional investment, which therefore reduces the disagreeableness and so prevents the war. Your opinion's still going to lie somewhere on the spectrum, but you're going to hold it with a more reasonable attitude. What you've essentially done is provide yourself with the tools of information to fuel a little empathy for your fellow man. The data's allowed you to walk a few miles in their shoes. You don't have to take the whole journey, but anyone who's run a 5K has nothing but respect for someone who runs a marathon, even if you haven't run it yourself. And in all this research and finding out, you go from being knowledgeable to wise. As Essop says, if you only seek to be knowledgeable, you become incorrigible. But if you try to see both sides, you become wise. If this makes sense, give me the thumbs up. If you disagree with me, you're a stupid idiot, and you're wrong, and I hate you. If you like my vibe, please subscribe. Woo! Woo!